All right, now here we are. Um, Hi, Philippe. Um, you're the first to join, um, and I'll like you here. And there's Lisa. Can you hear me, Lisa? I can't. I don't know if it's working. Um, oh, Philip, you can see and hear me. Okay, great, perfect. Well, it's 3 p.m., so it's time to start. Oh, Richard Egan and Tony, that's great. Great to see you again, or hear from you, Richard, and Loris. Loris is here. Lisa Kelly is here. Uh, Loris DiMarchi. Well, I'll give you a little quick update, and then I have a whole bunch of questions selected. I've been getting lots of really excellent questions from people from my website, www.feelinggood.com, as well as from some of you who are watching these Facebook Sunday broadcasts. And just by way of update, this is Sunday, January 7th, 2018. It's 3 p.m. here in California. So this is my first broadcast of 2018 after being off for 2 weeks for the holidays. And I tried this before I started this broadcast. I tried for about 1 minute, tried something called screen sharing, and then thousands of screens, each getting smaller and smaller, seemed to appear without my picture, and I couldn't see that was doing anything, so I turned that off and then reopened it up again to do it in the regular vein. Loris is here. Benjamin Mitchell is here. Hi, David from London. Hi, Benjamin. And Richard Earhart. And so I have a few questions to get us started. And then if you have questions of your own, just type them in there, and I'll be really pleased to address them. The questions have all been interesting and of high quality, although I don't know if there's a low quality question. All questions are high quality. Oh, let me say that today we had about 8 or 9, maybe 10 hikers for the Sunday hike, and we did a ton of healing. And I think I must have worked with at least 6, maybe 7 people on the hike. Well, probably more like 6 or 7. And it was just a great day. Some people were working on personal issues, conflict with father. Someone was having conflict with her therapist. One was having conflict with a son. Was another one. We did a lot of personal mood issues. A common theme is, I'm a failure. I'm not good enough, even though these are, for the most part, therapists. I think therapists, there's a thin line between therapist and patient, and I think we all struggle with some of these same kinds of issues. But it was just an awesome hike today. Not only was the quality of the dialogue good, but people were just so warm and vulnerable and open and real, and trusting and sharing and supporting each other. We limited it to about a maybe 3-hour hike or a little less, because we were on a little bit of a tight schedule today and wanted to go. One of the hikers is a vegan, so hasn't been able to go to the restaurants afterwards, vegan, vegetarian. So we went today to a fabulous vegan, vegetarian Chinese place on El Camino, and 6 of us went, not all the hikers went, and just had a sumptuous feast. So it was just a day of, so far, it's been a day of celebration of life. My wife and I are both kind of socially phobic, socially avoidant. We're kind of really antisocial, to tell you the truth. We're just happy to stay here at home with our cats and do our thing. But the hikes are just such a wonderfully comfortable and enjoyable thing. It's so much different from being like at a cocktail party or a party with a bunch of people, strangers, and you have to make chit chat. And when we have to do that, we do our best at it, and probably adequate at it, but it's not fun in the way the hikes are fun. It's just something so peaceful and joyous about being with people who are real, and often they're very high-powered, talented people who are feeling really that they're inadequate. There were some tears flowing today, and then just a lot of joy, I think, as people turn these issues around. People were just particularly, I would just say, warm and open. Okay, here's some questions. Hi, David. I hope you're well. Enjoyed the recent podcast. I'm not sure which podcast that was, by the way, but I always enjoy the humor as well as the tremendous wisdom of the team. And thank you for those kind comments. Are there powerful ways of dealing with generic core beliefs like my worth is attached to my achievement? This person, Greg, goes on to say, I was making a stew today, and as I was preparing the vegetables, I was not doing it in as good a way as I thought it should be done. And then I had the thought, everyone is better than me at everything. That came into my mind as usual. And maybe some of you have had thoughts like this, maybe not exactly worded the same, but I had dinner with a high-powered friend, graduate degree from prestigious university, and has done a lot of pretty impressive things in his life. He's been a little bit of a free spirit, pursued his own course rather than following the conventional paths. But he was telling me, I wake up every morning telling myself that I'm a failure, and he has this really a bully voice inside telling him that your career isn't good enough, you haven't found the love of your life, and when you have thoughts like that, it is so painful, and they seem so real. So Greg goes on to say, I then took this thought and did a variety of techniques to try to crush it. Good for you, Greg. And I used examine the evidence was one technique. I also looked at the advantages and disadvantages of giving myself this kind of message, as well as what beautiful and awesome things this thought says about me. Cool, Greg, that you're onto some of the newer techniques as well as some of the really good older established powerhouse techniques. I rated and re-rated my belief in this thought, and the most powerful techniques seem to be what beautiful and awesome things this thought means about me and says about me. And this reduced the strength of my belief to 60%, and I did feel quite emotional. But then I got to thinking, Greg, why are you associating your worth with your achievement? That's all wrong. Is there a good way to deal with this kind of belief in particular? Well, I'll just outline a few quick approaches here. I've been writing on this in my new book, Feeling Great. By the way, I haven't been editing my new book since the end of September. And I got up real early this morning before the Sunday hike, and I edited one of the chapters and got real excited about the new book again. The reason I haven't been working on the new book is because I had these 15 presentations that I had to prepare at really major conferences this fall, like the Evolution of Psychotherapy conference in Anaheim. I had to give 5 presentations, and I gave 2 at the annual meeting of the ABCT conference, the Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Therapies, and I did 4 at a trauma conference up in Calgary, Canada, and a number of other workshops as well. And I just didn't have the time. And now I have no workshops for a couple of months. I'm going to do very few workshops this year and work on the new book. And this is one of the themes among many that I'll be pursuing in the book. This thought, I'm not good enough, I'm a failure. So many people feel this way, and it creates depression and shame and anxiety and hopelessness, and in some cases anger and inadequacy, inferiority, and a host of other feelings as well. So Greg says, is there a good way to deal with this kind of belief in particular? Well, I'm setting up 5 podcasts when Fabrice gets back from New Zealand. We have got a few Ask Davids, and we have to do some loose ends on the 5 Secrets series that we're finishing right now. But then I have 5 kind of on 5 secrets of happiness, or 5 things you can do to boost your happiness and self-esteem. And one of them will be on this theme of linking your self-esteem with your achievements. And also there will be a lot on this theme in the new book. And because I have them mapped out pretty effectively, I think, in that upcoming podcast, which I suspect will be, 5 or 6 weeks down the line. I'll just mention a few. Now one is, the basic technique here is identify the distortions. You see, if you have a thought like everyone is better at me than everything, or my worth as a human being depends on my achievements. Well, you can say, what are the distortions in these kinds of thoughts? And when you say everyone is better than me at everything, well, that seems to be jumping to conclusions, all or nothing thinking, a mental filter, discounting the positive. It's emotional reasoning. I feel inadequate, so I must be inadequate. I feel worthless and inferior, so I must be worthless and inferior. It's a hidden should statement. I should be better at things. I should be better than I am. It's self-blame, and it's an overgeneralization too, because you're generalizing from some specific thing of, stirring some stew or preparing vegetables. I'm sure many people have great expertise in preparing vegetables, better than I am, and probably better than you can do, Greg. But does it follow that we're less worthwhile as human beings on the one hand, and does it follow that everyone is better at us than everything? That in a way doesn't make a lot of sense. So that would be identify the distortions. Now, another thing you can do, you can repeat the cost-benefit analysis. You can take this thought, my worth depends on my achievements. And then you can put a line down the middle of a piece of paper. In the left-hand column, you can list all the advantages or benefits of having this belief. And in the right-hand column, all the disadvantages of this belief. Now, there are many advantages if you base your self-esteem, and this is something you need to do, each person who has this belief, you need to do it on paper rather than just listening to me talk. But for example, some of the advantages is this will motivate you to achieve. You'll work tremendously hard. If you base yourself on your self-esteem on your achievements, you may do better work. You may make more money, and when you do succeed at something, you'll feel happy because you'll say, "Oh, I'm worthwhile now because I've just achieved something." Also, when you say, my worth as a human being depends on my achievements, you may also have a perfectionistic belief linked in there, like, and furthermore, I have to do everything perfectly or there's no point in doing it, or if second best is not enough. I've got to hit a home run every time. And another advantage of that belief is that makes it seem like you're superior to other people because you have such high standards. We could only ask perfection and constant achievement from someone who's a kind of a giant. So it may give you at times feelings of kind of moral superiority. And then once you've listed all these advantages, there's probably more than the ones I've just mentioned. List the disadvantages in the right-hand column. What price do we pay for linking your self-esteem or your worthwhileness as a human being with your achievements? I'll prime the pump with just one or two, but I'm sure you can add many more. One thing is that it's hard to be successful all the time. I've had many failures. I fail every day pretty much at things. Like the other night, I was working live with someone in the Tuesday group, and we're doing 3 live groups in 3 different rooms, working with people on personal issues, and it was a very tremendous group. The one I was in, we were working on with a woman who felt unlovable because her boyfriend had broken up with her, and we did, I thought, some really excellent work. But one of the people in the group, I had him, trying to use some technique with the patient, and then I corrected him because I didn't think he was doing it properly, and then I jumped in and kind of took over and showed, here's how you do that technique. I didn't think anything of it, and then he dinged me in the evaluation saying, David, I want you to, when you correct me, to give me a chance to do it the new way. And so when I read that after the group on the feedback form, I thought, boy, he's really right. That's a way I need to improve my teaching. Sometimes I jump in and take over, and it'd be much better for the students if I say, here's your error, here would be a different way to do it. Now you try it, so they end up with a feeling of mastery. But one of the disadvantages of basing your self-esteem on your accomplishments is when you get feedback like that, instead of looking at it as an opportunity to grow and to learn and to develop a better relationship with the person who criticized you by seeing the truth in what they're telling you, you get all ashamed and depressed and feel kind of worthless. When you fail or when you don't do your very best. That would just be one downside of linking your self-worth with your achievements, and you could probably come up with 6 or 8 or 10 other disadvantages, and then at the bottom balance them on a 100-point scale. I put 2 circles connecting them like a barbell or dumbbell at the bottom, and then put 2 circles, put 2 numbers adding up to 100 in those circles. Like if the advantages are better, outweigh the disadvantages, you might put 75 in the left-hand circle of the advantages, basing your self-esteem on your achievement, and 25 points on the disadvantages side. Or it may be 50-50, or it may be 40-60, where the disadvantages are greater. And if it turns out the advantages are greater, then this isn't a problem that you're asking for my help with. And so we could move on to something else. But if the disadvantages are greater, then you can revise that belief. What's another way you could think about achievement and personal worthwhileness that where you could maintain all those advantages and get rid of the disadvantages? What new value could you substitute? I'll leave that up to you folks to try to figure that out if you do this exercise. Oh, John. Hi, John. I'm so thrilled that you're joining today. And a whole bunch of people here. Monica, Guilio, Michael, Cal, Frederico, Pavlovsky, Sin Academica, Ernesto, Laura, Baranda, Julie Ann Linden, and John Graham. You give my heart joy to show up and join us. Thank you, John, from San Francisco. And then Gina Lawrence and Ramatu Karambiri and Benjamin Mitchell again, Selma. But anyway, to finish, just some other techniques you can use. And as I say, I've got a really, I think it's going to be a good feeling good podcast on that whole thing of self-worth and achievement. But another thing you can do is let's be specific. Like the Buddha said that these our problems exist up in the clouds of abstraction, and when you say I'm a failure or everyone is better than me at everything, let's be specific. What are you talking about? What exact things am I doing that seem like failure? So like the colleague on the hike was helped by the idea, like when you say when I tell myself I'm a failure, the failure must the failing must be happening at a specific moment on a specific day. Failure isn't some vague thing up in the clouds. When you say I'm a failure, it sounds like this global thing that can't be appealed or dealt with. But like, what am I failing right now? For example, on the hike, I'm talking to David, I'm doing a lot of personal growth, I'm examining my negative thoughts. This certainly doesn't seem like failing. This seems like growing and learning. Well, when did this so-called failure take place? When specifically was I failing, and what specifically am I doing wrong that I need to work on? Is there a problem in my relationship with my girlfriend, for example? Well, what exactly is going on there, and what errors are I making? How can I grow and learn and move forward? But I'll have at least a dozen techniques for challenging this belief that I'm a failure, or I'm not good enough, or basing self-esteem on achievements. Now, I've got some questions here. I have a whole host of, 8 or 10 questions I've picked out, but I'm going to give you folks first choice here. And I think we've got one here from Benjamin Mitchell. In the second Marilyn podcast session, you did a role play where you were doing externalization of voices responding to Marilyn's distorted thought. I think it was Marilyn's thought, I shouldn't waste my time watching TV. And you responded with a phrase like, David, in the voice of Marilyn, responding to the distorted belief. Tell me what I am tired of. I'm tired of your Marilyn's negative thought bullshit. I found this very interesting. It was useful to see sometimes you don't have to entangle yourself with a battle with a negative thought, but it also seemed like a little ambitious and potentially angry or not very empathic response. You remember the interaction. Can you say more about what your goal was? Yes, thank you. And your question wasn't clear for the people who aren't familiar with the podcast or with the content, but I grasp exactly what you're saying. In general, first of all, the way I relate to patients varies a lot and is pretty freewheeling. Sometimes I'm quite aggressive, and if you have a really good empathic relationship with someone, if you're getting perfect empathy scores, and if you've done great empathy and asked the person, are we getting great empathy? You have a lot more freedom to be free and spontaneous. And sometimes, usually when I make a humorous comment, it works beautifully and the person likes it. One time on a hike recently, I made a humorous comment, and the hiker got upset and angry with me. And then I backed off and empathized, and we had plenty of strength in our relationship to allow for an error, for him to be angry with David, and to got dialogue on that, and to use that as a way of building a closer relationship. But to answer your excellent question on the content, and this is something I've been thinking about quite a bit lately, it's the general question is, how do we get rid of these negative thoughts in our brains that are haranguing us all the time? The voice that says, you're not good enough, you're a screw up, you're a failure, you shouldn't have made this mistake, you should be making more money, you should have a better career, you should have more loving relationships. And one or all of the cognitive techniques that Beck has developed, and I have developed, and Albert Ellis has developed, and a multitude of other people as well, to show that those negative thoughts that make us so miserable are not true, that they're distorted, that they're fraudulent. And the moment you no longer believe the thoughts, in that very instant, your mood will change. And by in that instant, I mean maybe 1 or 2 or 5 seconds, whoop, your depression will diminish or disappear entirely. It's a very fast and dramatic thing. But there are many ways of getting rid of negative thoughts. Sometimes you can accept the truth in the negative thought and defeat it that way. That's called the acceptance paradox. But another thing that I was doing here with Marilyn, and I do it all the time with people, when we're doing externalization of voices, I have the patient attack me as if I was their positive side with their negative thoughts, and then I model how to crush the negative thoughts, and then we do role reversals. And once I figure out how to get sound going in both ways here, or get two people involved, I can demonstrate that externalization of voices, and we'll definitely be doing it on upcoming podcasts so you can see how that works. You've really got to see it and experience it to grasp it, or listen to the session with Marilyn. But another way is simply to make the person aware the problem is not that you've had limited success or partial success or this level of success, or that you're not as fulfilled as you'd like to be in your relationships with others and your love relationships. But the problem is not that you have flaws, that you have faults. Your misery comes from the fact that you're beating up on yourself, that there's a bully there. That's where your suffering is coming from. It's not that you're not making enough money, because I've treated people of incredible wealth and fame who were depressed and suicidal because they're doing the same as the rest of us, bombarding themselves with negative thoughts, I'm not good enough, or thoughts that make them enraged or angry or ashamed. And the problem is that we're doing that to ourselves. Now, usually I have 50, 100 techniques to crush these negative thoughts, or the acceptance paradox, to help people let go of them. But lately, what I've been asking my colleagues to think about, and what I've been thinking about, let's take that one person in 100, that one person in 1,000, maybe someone who's listening to me right now, for example, who finds it difficult to use these techniques. Well, maybe there's just a river of powerful motivation to beat up on oneself that's under the surface, and that we need to develop some new techniques to deal with that. Now, we have all of the paradoxical agenda setting techniques to deal with motivation, and they're tremendous. But maybe there's other aspects of motivation that we need new techniques to deal with. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Now, I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm very, very alarmed by him, by his behavior, by his tendency to attack his opponents rather than to listen, to feel the need always to argue, always to retaliate, whether it's the leader of North Korea that he gets into a battle with, or his political opponents, or the Clintons. He seems intent on revenge and winning battles. And the problem is when you argue and defend yourself, you create more battles. And my fear here is I don't want a leader who's always not listening and thinks that the key to the future, to a good, successful, great America or great self, is to argue and defeat everyone without listening. I'm just really worried that is not a path to peace and joy and prosperity. But here is the point that I'm trying to make, and I'm making it in a roundabout way, is that let's take about a third of the country, it appears, are very fervent Trump supporters. Lately, a tremendous amount of compelling information has come out which seems to indicate that Trump lies, that he's a bit unstable, that his policies can rightfully be seen as pretty hateful. A lot of examples of lies and inconsistencies in what he's saying. But here is my point: is that the more of this information that comes out that shows he's wrong about many of the things he's saying, the more his supporters support him, the more entrenched they become. And this is a social phenomenon, although I'm not a social psychologist, that when we have a strong belief system, that people who come up with evidence that challenges our belief system often just makes us more entrenched and determined to support belief system. Suppose, for example, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, and I'm trying to come to my new insight about the treatment of depression. But let's say I'm not a Catholic, and I don't believe that holy water is holy. It's just a kind of a symbolic thing that the Catholics do, part of their rituals. But suppose I went to the Pope or to some Catholic priest and said, I have an arrangement with the Stanford Water Laboratory, and we're going to test your holy water to see if it has any special properties. And we're pretty certain that we can show it has no special properties. It's not actually holy water, just tap water. Do you think the Catholics would be interested in collaborating in that kind of experiment? Well, the answer is no. I presume the answer is no, that they would get irritated and feel attacked and feel a need to defend themselves. Now, here's the point I've been trying to drive up to. What if some people who are depressed have a similar kind of worldview that they are very intent on defending? Now, where did that worldview come from? Did it come from, one of our hikers today, I have to disguise this to protect identity, but from this time that this person was little, had a sibling and a parent who over and over said, you're no good, you're unattractive, you're ugly, you're not intelligent, nobody is going to like you. And the hiker really believed that, and until the hikes of the last few weeks, she suffered in tremendous misery and self-doubt and depression and anxiety and social anxiety, and just had some fantastic transformations on the recent hikes, which was a joy. She was so courageous, so vulnerable, so open, and so fantastic. But maybe we have these, for some reason, we incorporate this almost like a personal philosophy. And so maybe by trying to show people that their negative thoughts aren't valid, some people it's going to just back them up more into a kind of a corner. And if that's the case, this could open up some avenues for even new and even more powerful techniques to overcome depression. As I say in my own work, I would say 90-95% of the time I find people with depression can usually turn it around completely in just a single 2-hour therapy session. But how about those 5 or 10%, or maybe it's as many as 20% of the people who are so rigidly stuck? Wouldn't it be cool if we could find out why they're stuck and then figure some cool techniques to antidote it so they too could find their enlightenment and their joy? So anyway, there's my little sermonette for today. Let's find some more. Phil, welcome back, Dr. David. With the help of the Feeling Good Institute, I can now see and hear you. I'm not a social media guru at all. Well, thank you. And I don't know about how the Feeling Good Institute comes in, but maybe you link to my weekly podcast through the Feeling Good Institute. But all of you, remember, you can just register on my website, feelinggood.com. In the upper right-hand corner of each page, there's a kind of a column to the right, and at the top there's a widget for signing up. And although we're getting I'm getting 40,000 hits a month on my website, and we're getting from my podcast 40,000 downloads a month, still not a lot of people have signed up. And if you go and sign up, then you'll be notified every time I post something, a podcast or a blog or something like that. So you're welcome to go to feelinggood.com and sign up. Let's see if there's others questions. Yeah, Richard Martin, because I have, as I say, a ton of them here, but I want to give you folks first priority. Okay, Dr. Burns, can you talk about what you mean basically when you say motivation comes after you start doing something? I think in general layman's terms, people generally think that they need motivation before they can do something or they won't do it. Well, I actually have a podcast coming up on that too, because one of my in the series of 5 steps to happiness or 5 secrets of happiness is to do something that you've been procrastinating about doing. And do it even if you're not in the mood. And one of the ways that I use is to break a task down into little small steps. And I actually use something called the anti-procrastination sheet, but you can do this on any piece of paper. Like I've had to, like, it's a time of year where I have to do all my expense reporting from last year because we go to our accountant in a couple of months and we have to show her. I don't know how the new tax law will work on this, but at least for this last year, we have to show all of our business expenses and have them itemized and, you know, pretty tightly and accurately presented with receipts and everything. And I find that and other similar chores pretty intensely anxiety provoking and want to procrastinate in doing them. In fact, here's something cool. Here's proof. Do you see that stack of stuff right there? That's the result of my anti-procrastination. I'm almost entirely done with it. And the way I did it was I said you're only allowed to work on this for just, you know, a few minutes. And what's the first thing you'd have to do, and how difficult do you think it will be between 0 and 100? And how rewarding? And then what's the second thing you'll have to do? How difficult and how rewarding? And so I broke it into little tiny steps, and I agreed to do it. Even I had no motivation to do it, but I just, okay, this is something I've chosen to do. And so the first step was sit down and turn on the computer. Well, that was about 0% difficult. It wasn't terribly rewarding. And then the second thing was find last year's expense files, like for 2016, and then move those files to a new category called 2018 and just change the dates. And how difficult is that going to be between 0 and 100? And how rewarding is that going to be? And I predicted it would be about, you know, 5 or 10% difficult. And then after you do it, you say, how difficult did it turn out to be and how rewarding? And I also predicted how long is this going to take. And I predicted that step would take about 5 minutes, and it took about 10 minutes, but it wasn't really difficult at all. And then take one file out of this drawer down here, and I took the mail expenses first, and then start to record the first few receipts. Just put the amount in a column in a table in Microsoft Word and just type in the amounts. And that was about maybe 1% difficult on a 0 to 100. And it was actually about 15 or 20% satisfying. And then the next step was complete the mailing category, and how difficult is that going to be, and how rewarding do you think that's going to be, and then how difficult was it, and how rewarding was it? So the key here is to break a task into little tiny steps, and limit your activity to, you know, something like 5 minutes worth of work. And then what happens to me is once I get started on it, I begin to see, hey, this isn't really all that tough at all, because I'm only focusing on one tiny step at a time, not like climbing the whole mountain to the top. Just take one step forward. And generally that step is not that difficult. And then once I've accomplished some things, I get to feeling motivated. You see, that's what I mean. You have to get started on the thing first, and then motivation follows action. It's not true that motivation comes first. Successful people know that action comes first, and then motivation will come along for the ride later on. So that's a simple approach to defeating procrastination, and that's one of the things you can really do to make yourself happier, because the problem is that when you have these things you're procrastinating on, it starts eating away at you. That's the problem with avoidance. Benjamin says, thanks, David, for your answer. Keep up the great podcast, especially the live sessions, which have been really useful for me. Well, yes, by the way, the fellow who I'm disguising as the name Jonathan, who was saying, I feel like a failure. When I do that podcast on Boost Your Mood, that's one of these 5 techniques. Use the daily mood log, record your negative thoughts, crush your negative thoughts, and I'll show about a dozen ways to do this for the thought I'm a failure or I should be better. The cool thing is the fellow who's agreed to appear on that podcast, named Jonathan, has agreed to come and discuss that evening that we had over a pizza, and also to discuss these techniques and show how they work. And I think you'll like him because he's very personable and articulate guy, and because he's immersed in this very thing, it makes it more real, and we can role play and show how some of the techniques work. And also, I do hope to continue doing live these things live. In fact, what I'm hoping to do, it probably won't come to pass, but I was contacted by a reality television show producer for the A&E network, and proposed to him, they're looking for a mental health show, and said, well, how about, Hiking with David or David's weekly, training group showing the making of a therapist, show how the therapists are doing live work, how we have, insecurities and flaws just like everyone, and how therapists, to become a great therapist, it's necessary to deal with your own inadequacies, and how great it would be to be able to show these live sessions, not just on my podcasts on audio, but on national television. And I don't know if it would be ethical or possible, or if they'll have any real interest in it, but I have my fingers crossed, because I think people all over the world could be helped so much by seeing every week that people's lives being changed before their very eyes, and see that therapy doesn't have to be some endless thing of talking for months, but that what we're looking for is dramatic, rapid changes in today's session, if possible. That can't always be done, but it can often be done. And then Mylod Karampur says, David Burns, up with you. Thank you so much. That's better than the expression up yours, which is the opposite meaning, but up with you, and a couple of beautiful flowers there, and it seems so kindly, and I appreciate that. Yeah, Lisa says, I posted information on the Feeling Good Facebook to promote it. People need to like your public Facebook page. Can you folks like my public Facebook page? And also, I don't know if you'd have time, Lisa, in case anyone would like to listen to those live sessions with Marilyn. We've gotten so many praise for Marilyn, gratitude. She is the woman who agreed to come on and talk about how she felt after receiving a diagnosis of stage 4 lung cancer. And I think it was, and I'm Matthew May, a former student and now a dear colleague and psychiatrist in practice here in Menlo Park, was my co-therapist, and it was one of the most moving and inspirational and mind-blowing sessions I've ever been involved in. And if I don't want to leave the podcast, I was going to look it up before the podcast and forgot, but if like Lisa could find it and give us the date of that podcast, then someone can go to my feelinggood.com, if that's the way you link to the Feeling Good podcast, and go to the blogs, and then Feeling Good podcast is one of the blogs, and then you could just back up to that date, and then you can begin to listen to, if you're so inclined, these sessions with Marilyn. I think I called the first session The Dark Night of the Soul, because she went into total darkness when she discovered she had stage 4 lung cancer, severe depression, intense panic, and extreme rage and anger as well. And I think when you see someone changing before your very eyes, it just it's worth its weight in gold. No amount of lectures or books can ever convey the beauty and magic of that kind of experience. Fair Marino, hi, I'm going to like you, Fair, and I'm going to like Richard Martin and like Lisa again. Fair Marino says that's also called the do something principle. You start with something little, eventually that little thing can lead you to another one, and that's right. And as the Buddhists have so often said, that the longest trip, the longest journey begins with a single step, and that is so true. Also, Dottie, I'm liking you. I'm liking Benjamin Mitchell. Anyone who has hi, I'm Dottie from Ohio. Well, thank you, Dottie. And anyone with a like under their name, like Phil McCormick, I'm clicking these likes, and I don't even know what likes do, but it doesn't seem to be a bad thing. And Lisa says to like my Facebook page. And some of you, you're getting multiple likes because your name appears multiple times. Some of you, I'm not liking you just because the word like doesn't appear under your name. And I'm such a novice, I don't understand how much of this works. Here's another question from Katie. I enjoy listening to your podcast. I'm wondering if you could perhaps address hypochondriasis. I can appreciate CBT and exposure, but how does one approach hypochondriasis? Would be nice to hear about it. Well, I don't have, magical approaches for problems. I work with hypochondriasis as a form of anxiety where you keep going to doctors because you think there's something there's something wrong with you, that you have some medical illness, and the doctor keeps saying that there's really nothing there. And again, I can't remember what stories I've told or not told, but one of the techniques that I use, just one of 4 models I use in treating anxiety. I use the cognitive model, the motivational model, the exposure model, but also the hidden emotion model. And often people who have hypochondriasis are upset about something that you're not addressing in your life, a kind of hidden problem or feeling that you're kind of suppressing because you think you're not supposed to feel like that. And that's my telephone ringing, which I'm just going to ignore here, and hope that doesn't bother you too much. No, a fellow came to me in Philadelphia with hypochondriasis. His problem is he was going to the doctor every week or two, and like he'd cut himself shaving and notice it was bleeding, and then he'd have the thought, maybe I have leukemia. So then he'd go to some blood specialist and persuade the person to give him blood tests, and then everything would turn out normal, and then a week or so later he was having headaches, and he thought he had a brain tumor, and then he went to a neurologist, and he was just getting workup after workup, and it would just, everything always turned out normal, and finally he got referred to me. Now his story, he was an older fellow, not real old, but at the time he seemed old. I was probably in my mid-30s, and he was like probably early 50s. So to me, that was old. Now it doesn't look that way. But but he was a very handsome man, and he had made a lot of money in business, and so he had retired. He'd been divorced, and then he met a beautiful young woman, and they got married, and they were pretty happily married. But as I talked to him, I was asking, is there anything that you're unhappy about. And, oh, no, I'm happily married. Everything is wonderful. He kept insisting everything was wonderful. That's the issue with the hidden emotion technique. The thing that's bugging you will often be hidden from your conscious awareness. And so you'll tell yourself, and maybe even your therapist, there is nothing wrong, when there really may be something bothering you. And then after 3 or 4 weeks, I kept checking with him every week, as I do with anxious patients. Have you come up with something that's bothering you? And then after about 4 weeks, he owned up to the fact that shortly after he got married, he thought that he and his beautiful young wife, who he was madly in love with, would go traveling around the world because he was incredibly wealthy. And that was what he thought they would do. But what she decided to do is to go back to graduate school to get a PhD in clinical psychology. Well, that's like an 80-hour-a-week kind of thing. I know, because my wife went back to school and got a PhD in clinical psychology, and she just had to work incredibly. Plus, we had kids, so it was massively demanding. How she did it, I don't even know. I just had so much admiration that she could do that, and she was really a top student as well. But at any rate, once this fellow told me that, I suddenly figured out what the hidden emotion was. Do any of you see it? Well, I can't ask for a show of hands. My tools are limited. I can't ask you verbally. But, oh yeah. Thank you, Lisa. I'll read this in a minute. Well, yeah. I'll finish the story and then come back to finding the Feeling Good, the Maryland podcast. The date of the Maryland podcast was what I was hoping for on the websites, so people would know where to find it. But at any rate, I said, how do you feel about the fact that you married this beautiful woman, you're madly in love with her, now she's spending 80 hours a week going to graduate school, and you've got almost no time with her. And he said, well, it's fine that she's doing what she wants to do, and she should be able to do that. And I said, well, that's not what I asked you. I asked you how you're feeling. Do you have any negative feelings, like feeling lonely or feeling disappointed? And then he sheepishly admitted that he was feeling that way. And then I said, well, have you shared your feelings with your wife? And he said, oh, no, a man isn't supposed to feel that way. Yeah, this idea the man is some macho person who takes the lead and is never vulnerable or is never upset. And then he agreed to bring his wife in for a couples therapy session, which was not difficult because they weren't at odds with each other. They were both very much in love. But I just did marital therapy 101 and asked him to share his feelings and ask her to paraphrase and ask her to share her feelings and ask him to paraphrase what she said, so they could begin to open up. And finally I got him to say to her what she was afraid to say, that I love you so much, but since you've started your PhD program, I just want to tell you I've just been feeling kind of lonely and disappointed, and I miss you. And then he began to cry, and she just hugged them, and they both began to feel so close once again. And the interesting thing was that suddenly his hypochondriasis disappeared. And in addition, she didn't have to change her schedule or anything. It was just a way for the two of them to suddenly feel close and reconnected, to share their feelings openly. It was really a beautiful conclusion. So that was just one tool. I've developed 50, 100 methods I use in therapy, and so that hidden emotion method would just be one of them. Yeah, Lisa just said she lost connection temporarily, but people can find your Maryland videos by Googling the Feeling Good podcasts or by going on your website. Exactly. But what I was hoping is if you, Lisa, or someone could go to my website, feelinggood.com, and go to blogs and then go to Feeling Good Podcasts and just scroll down until you find the first of the 3 or 4 Marilyn podcasts. So I could give people the date to look for. It's not necessary. People can do that on their own. Dwight says, sounds like he was angry and very disappointed. He wasn't that angry. But that's a great thought that you have, Dwight. And hello, Dwight, by the way. Oh, I'm going to like you, Dwight. Like Lisa again. Like Saki holding us. But yes, a lot of people, anger is often the suppressed emotion that can lead to hypochondriasis or anxiety attacks of various kinds. But it could be anything. In this case, it was just loneliness that he was afraid of sharing with her. The fact that he felt lonely and thought that was wimpy for a man to feel lonely, and you know. And I'm not sure that it's just men who have trouble sharing feelings. I see women have just as much trouble sharing feelings, because we all have these ideas. I should feel a certain way. I shouldn't feel another way. Today on the hike, one of the therapists was struggling because she's in therapy and she's upset with her therapist because she thought, you know, some of the sessions are just talking and not really doing all that much, and a kind of a lack of empathy. But that she was saying, oh, I shouldn't tell my therapist that I was disappointed in our last session because I might hurt his feelings or hurt her feelings. And there was a lot of initial resistance to being open. It's just so interesting thinking that you believe you're not allowed to tell your therapist how you feel. But fortunately, she just did great and turned it around and learned some tremendous communication techniques she's going to use at her next session. And she really brightened up, and she was just so brave and awesome to work with. Here, Fair Marino. I remember when you came to Mexico City to ANAHUAC University. It was an amazing workshop. Thank you so much. I loved coming down there. Everyone was so friendly. And I recently, a fellow came to my workshop somewhere in the East, I think. But he asked to have dinner with me, and then I discovered that he's president of a university in Mexico and wants to bring it to a strong focus on cognitive therapy. And I said, I was just in Mexico a couple of years ago for a workshop, and they said, well, who are those people? I want to connect with them. But now I can't remember who he was, what university he was from, but hopefully I can figure this out and correct you, because this is a fellow who I think he came from Germany or somewhere in Europe, and he's president of a major university in Mexico and wants it to become very focused on team therapy and cognitive therapy. It might have even been in Denver where he came to hear my trauma workshop recently, but I'll try to figure that out. Oh, here we go, Lisa. She saved us. The 2 Marilyn podcasts were on October 26th and October 28th. She says the date is October 28th. Was that the initial Marilyn podcast or the tune-up? I'm not sure which, but that at least gives us something to hang our hat on. And October 26th and October 28th, that doesn't make sense, but maybe you can look for October 28th. So let's see. Right now it's 3:57, so rather than launching on one of these juicy big questions, I'll just see if there's any other quick questions from anyone. And I think I've gotten most of you here. I've clicked on a lot of likes for people, and it's great to be back. I do enjoy answering questions and chatting with you, and I hope this idea of a reality TV show would come to pass, because it would be a way of bringing hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people together to share some mind-blowing experiences. And thank you all for coming. You made my day. John from San Francisco, I don't know if you're still with us, but it touches me that you joined us. I know in you we have someone with tremendous brilliance and tremendous resources, and I'm honored that you're joining us. In Santiago, Trujillo Lemus, thank you for coming. Thank you, Alicia Ferrari, for coming. Thank you, Adith Sesmundo, and Selma Franca, and Ramatu Karambri. It's just very, very touched and grateful that all of you would want to join. I know when I was growing up, I was in Phoenix. My dad was a Lutheran minister. We didn't see ourselves, I didn't see myself as having any real degree of fame or recognition. And now a number of people are following my work, and some seem to be benefiting from it. And you know, it's touching to me. It means a great deal. It's not something I would have expected, but I greatly enjoy. So anyway, just to show you I can still smile. Oh, and Lisa, I rebelled today. I didn't clean up after my hike and put on a nice shirt. I just figure if people like what I'm saying, they can take me grubbily today, but probably next week I'll spiff myself up and try to look good. But anyway, I wish you all a wonderful 2018. Thank you for tuning in today, and I look forward to next week. And again, if you have questions on anything, please feel free to email me or to type them in during the broadcast next Sunday, 3 p.m. Pacific time in California time, and have a terrific week. Oh, one last thing. I had so much trouble hearing recently, and it occurred to me I hadn't had my ears unplugged. I thought I was just going deaf. And it just dawned on me as I went to Kaiser, where we get our health care, and went to the audio ear, nose, throat department, and they have these really neat instruments for sucking the wax out of your ears. And so now I can hear again, and what a great thing that is. Lisa says, please email David directly, david@feelinggood.com. Feeling Good is one word with 2 G's in it. Tell them what you like and dislike about today's Feeling Good broadcast. Please share your feelings and thoughts as well as your questions. And I absolutely support that wonderful comment. And with that, we'll say goodbye, good evening, have a great week. Bye-bye.